Good. Yeah, I think people will join. Just a technical remark. Our keynote speaker will speak in Ukrainian, and there will be simultaneous translation to English and Polish. If you have headsets, Polish is number 1, English is number 2. If you don't have headsets, they can be obtained just across from there. On the right, there is a desk with headsets. Okay, let's start. First of all, I would like to welcome everybody to this third breakout session of the Europe Housing Forum 2024. I'm sorry. My name is Besim Nebiu, and I will be the moderator of this session. I work for Habitat for Humanity International. I'm the director for Central and Eastern Europe, and I've been with Habitat for many years. Today we really have a distinguished panel of speakers. I mean, I will introduce them to you when we come to the panel part, and we have a keynote a speaker who will have her remarks, Mrs. Ina Sarapina, who is here with us. She will have her remarks in Ukrainian. That we will, as the title says, we will delve into the complexities of navigating property and housing challenges, which are intertwined and are connected with, sort of the current moment in which, the previous housing and affordable housing challenges amplified with this tragic war in Ukraine. And we have a group of practitioners here, a group of researchers, policymakers, who tackle with issues from the multi-stakeholder perspective. So I think the complexity and the multi-stakeholder approach will be one of the things we would like to emphasize. I'll just briefly introduce Mrs. Ina Sarapina, who is here and who will have the keynote speech. She's a master's in public administration and management and regional development from the National Academy of Public Administration under the President of Ukraine. Since 1999, she's been working in the civil service system in various positions in Ukraine, and since 2015 she's working in the field of housing policy development, implementation, drafting regulation, providing opinions on draft laws, providing proposals, and etc., draft legislation at the ministry. Today she will represent officially the government of Ukraine. The floor is yours, Mrs. Sarapina.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you for the invitation to participate in this forum. Right, thank you for your invitation to this forum. Thank you for the fact that I've been able to listen to the previous speakers. International support from our partners is very important to my country, including on the subject of housing. Ukraine is facing huge challenges resulting from the Russian aggression on Ukraine. And as a result, we have to provide housing to our society. There have been huge losses in housing. We will have to rebuild a lot of houses, and the cost of rebuild is several times more than Ukraine's GDP. Most losses have been incurred in housing, but also the energy sector, industry and transport. We want to create right conditions for our citizens to be able to return to their country. We want to ensure that they have jobs, and we need to create a new housing policy. which will have the priority of looking after the rights and interests of our citizens, of our society. Today I would like to present to you our draft law on the housing policy that is being developed by the government. This draft is to set up a framework to address the issue of housing for the citizens of Ukraine and other people who are in the territory of Ukraine. We will update our legislation, that is the point of the new draft law. We have engaged international experts, the Refugee Council, European Commission, the United Nations, UNHCR, Council of Europe, and international organizations such as the IOM have been engaged. Our key team is composed of national organizations dealing with housing. The key goal in the drafting of a new housing policy is to create conducive conditions for our citizens to find housing. And this draft is to address a number of issues. We want an efficient, transparent system for the building of housing. We will be seeking to create an efficient and transparent system for the housing policy to secure public support and to provide support to the public in terms of housing. We will also be seeking to provide access to housing by setting up a mechanism to support the public. And we want this new system to be similar to that of other European states. We will be seeking to remove any clashing legislation. We want to set up a new transparent system. This is the structure of our draft law. It is composed of 4 chapters. Chapter number 1 is general provisions. It lays down the key principles of the housing policy. It is both on housing and funds. It also specifies the roles of state authorities and local authorities in housing policy. Please excuse me. That is the main chapter of our draft law. That is the core of the legislation. It defines which mechanisms would be applicable to housing. Then you have a chapter on the protection of housing rights. And chapter 4 are final and transitional provisions. It will also lay down which other acts need to be amended for this act to come into force. Now I'd like to discuss in more detail the proposed provisions. Here are the key principles of the housing policy. Availability of housing, accessibility of housing, ensuring affordability of housing. We will be supporting accessibility of housing to take advantage of various needs of the general public.
що передбачає, що власники та користувачі мають можливість стабільного здійснення прав володіння, користування та окремо.
The basic provisions provide for stability of access to housing,
що передбачає відкриту до своєчасної комунікації, розвитку та реалізацію житлової політики, і забезпечення вільної.
We will also be seeking to ensure public participation of the general public and other entities and stakeholders with regard to housing.
Своє право на житло. Датом вибору.
We will also be seeking to secure housing rights of the population by using all sorts of support mechanisms.
Це право на житло слушне житло. Не допускати фамілія, неживності перед
The right to housing should be secured for every citizen. Housing should be good enough to enable dignified life. Our new legislation will also seek to safeguard the rights of the public. We will be creating strategic plans for housing. We need a system with regard to housing policy. Social integration is about the mobility of citizens, preventing poverty.
Це робити також інші спонюрішечі.
We are also defining the priorities of the housing priority. This is the second part of Chapter 1. This will include addressing and preventing homelessness, efficient management of housing stock to provide adequate housing. We will be facilitating access to a variety of state support mechanisms. We will be enhancing the transparency in rental relationships. We will be engaging the public in the development and execution of housing policies.
Залучення легальності формування організації житлової політики. Там надали періодичне надання вимог споживчої.
We will also be looking to secure the right quality of housing, seeking to maintain standards and technologies that are up to date. Our working group, which has been creating this draft law, is to come up with rules that come from international programming documents. We will also be reflecting the provisions of the Constitution of Ukraine in our draft law.
We are also going to regulate housing funds. There is a division into the public and the private sector and local municipalities. So according to this measure, to build new houses, to rebuild existing buildings, residential and non-residential, we will be moving funds from residential fund to non-residential fund, or the other way round. All funds will be transferred to an adequate sector. Ownership rights will be provided according to Ukrainian legislation. New solutions are being introduced. There will be revolving funds available. Funds from municipal budgets will be accumulated on a special account to be later allocated to construction of new buildings or the upkeep and renovation of existing buildings.
And yeah, like about different church renovating.
There is a separate section on the accountability and roles of state authorities and local self-governments. What are the responsibilities of state authorities? It's going to adopt housing-related legislation. What is important is identification of responsibilities of local governments. This is regulated by the Act. Local government will be provided with measures to fulfill its role on the housing market. Section 4 provides measures to exercise the right to housing. Ukrainian citizens are buying apartments or houses. They're also eligible for social housing, and there will be separate measures applicable to housing cooperatives. So there are separate provisions in Ukrainian legislation which date back to the Soviet era. And we could not transform those provisions. Consultations have been completed. We have received feedback from our partners, which indicates that in other countries, such measures, housing co-ops, are highly efficient. We do realize that Ukraine is facing a fundamental problem. We need to solve problems with housing by making housing more accessible. Many other countries have different standards and definitions of availability. There are council flats, social housing, different types of housing. Our social housing will be made available to residents, to our citizens who will receive financial support to pay the rent. They will be eligible to such financial assistance. We do realize that there is a shortage of apartments in Ukraine, and we are not able to fulfill the need for housing, especially in terms of people who have been displaced in Ukraine. That's why private housing may be made available through rent. We are also tapping into other solutions that were available before, for example, mortgage loans, financial lease plans, and social rent with the right to buy. So such apartment remains the property of the local municipality, but is built with the help of international organizations. Another thing provided under the Ukrainian Act is establishment of a uniform IT system. It's an app. For each and every Ukrainian who needs a home, you enter your details to receive information about mechanisms or prospects available to you. For example, you may be eligible for social housing, or you may be eligible for a self-build scheme, or you may be eligible for a preferential mortgage loan. and the app will lead you to a municipality. Okay, just 3 slides left. I do apologize, but I want to present the act. Another important component, not only for Ukraine, but all countries in general, is shaping an efficient housing policy and providing the guarantee that the fundamental right to housing will may be exercised. So there will be a guarantee that tenants will not be evicted from their homes, that they will not be resettled. This is currently provided under Ukrainian law. Protection of housing rights, it's a very painful issue, which is a major aspect of the Ukrainian Act, central government, local government units, and the wide public will oversee implementation of the housing policy. The draft bill also provides standards that identify accountability of people who violate the rules and the Housing Act. Like I've said before, the draft bill on housing policy provides amendment of the current housing law that used to enable for 30 years free of charge right to buy. The right to buy was applicable to homes and apartments built in the communist era. So this act will come into force 6 months after its publication. Implementation of executory acts will follow, and a housing strategy will be implemented later. I would like to thank for contribution to the project. I would like to thank our partners and international organizations who made massive effort. And eventually we have managed to edit and adopt a document that will define our policy for the future.
Thank you, Mrs. Zina Sarapina, for giving this extensive introduction, because this is also an introduction to many things that would be said in the panel. It's an amazing body of work on basically restructuring, positioning the housing policy and the housing sector in Ukraine. And thank you for setting the outline for this. I'm going to go through the panelists for today. I said in the beginning I'm very lucky to be moderating a panel with such distinguished speakers, and I'll just go briefly through introducing them, and then we will go through a round of initial questions for each one of the panelists. They will speak approximately 7 minutes, and then we'll open it for discussion. The format of this is conversation, so we will not have further presentations. We are here to seek opinions and thoughts, and by all means, please do engage if you have questions. My first panelist today is Ms. Anna Pashynska, who is the co-founder and chairman of the board of METALAB. Happy and proud to announce that METALAB is one of the partners of Habitat for Humanity in Ukraine. Anna has been involved with housing, urbanism, urban regeneration rights movement in Ukraine before the war, and mostly in the capacity of a researcher and activist. And with the new challenges, her organization METALAB is involved in actual implementation of various housing and regeneration projects for which she will speak today. So the second panelist is Serhii Komnatnyi. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. Serhii, I've been practicing that for a while. He's a PhD in judicial sciences, among other things. In the past 10 plus years, he was working with the State Fund for Support of Youth Housing Construction. Between 2017 and 2023, he has actually chaired that board. Currently, he's with UNECE and various other initiatives of which Ina spoke as an expert. He's one of the foremost policy contributors and experts on housing rights issues in Ukraine. Then we have three panelists who are not from Ukraine but are very deeply connected with Ukraine, and I'll go. Yeah, my list is like that, so I'll skip a little bit. Sorry for that. Helen Knut Höller is executive member of the managing board and the leader of Housing Initiative for Eastern Europe, EVO. I think a lot of you would know EVO. We certainly, as Habitat, know EVO. We've been working with EVO since 2016, or a little bit plus or minus. He's an economist and an MBA. But what is more distinguishable for Knut is that he's almost universally known across Eastern Europe and CIS countries as the housing expert and advocate and activist, because he's worked literally in all of those countries in the past 20 years. And EVO has been at the forefront of those support mechanisms and projects. Among other things, I will mention that EVO was working in Ukraine much before the conflict, and has been involved both in the housing policy and the residential energy side of the reconstruction. Ellen Hamilton is a lead urban specialist from the World Bank. She comes from DC here. Welcome to Warsaw, Helen. And she's also a global expert and really a thought leader on many of the subjects that we will discuss here. She's been working on a variety of topics, such as housing, affordable housing, supply and demand, urban planning, municipal management, urban upgrading, in pretty much all of the countries in Central and Eastern Europe. Central and Eastern Europe is the area she covers for World Bank, and we are very happy to have her here today. And next to me is a very good friend of mine, Grzegorz Gajda, who now works for EIB. He's an urban specialist at EIB. But before EIB, he worked for IFC and lived in Ukraine for about 10 years, was instrumental in setting up the Energy Efficiency Fund for reconstruction of housing stock. So he's, in his daily job, assessing projects for EIB. So if you have any projects for EIB, here's who to talk to, both within EU and outside of the EU. But he's also one of the foremost experts on housing and residential issues in the region. So that is those are my panelists. I would like to ask you to please give a round of applause for them, and with thanks for joining today. Okay, I have prepared one question for each of the panelists, and then we will have a space for a discussion and a debate. My first question is to Knut Höller, and the question is: more than 1.4 million units in Ukraine are now damaged from the Russian aggression. How do you see? How would you depict the impact of the housing destruction and damages on what we already had as a fragile housing sector and communities in Ukraine? So, what would be your depiction of it, and how do you see maybe a little bit how to tackle these problems?
I pushed it up. Thank you, Besim, for the introduction. And I excuse for my German English a bit. I'm probably one of the two Germans here in the room, and thank you. I'm to Habitat for inviting me to this panel. After that, what Ina said, I would like to go a step back. Start with my experiences and perceptions in my work in Ukraine. Our small organization with 10 colleagues based in Berlin is an NGO focused on supporting the transition of housing sector in Ukraine, but not only in Ukraine, but also in other Eastern European countries. And therefore, I can compare a bit also what happens in other countries. And as I started in Ukraine in 2007, the German government found out that there should be a priority on energy efficiency in buildings. And I think we have this problem still today. Everybody knows mass privatization in Ukraine and the problems connected with this. My opinion is that the privatization of multifamily buildings is still not finished, and will be finished only with the refurbishment of these buildings. And it took from 2007 to 2020, just before the pandemic, that Ukraine installed the energy efficiency fund for the refurbishment of buildings. And I see still the existing housing stock as the main challenge Ukraine is faced, and how to bring this refurbishment of 19 million flats and more than half of the population is living in these multifamily buildings to an end. And I think one of the legislative challenges is still the improvement of the administration and maintenance of these multifamily buildings, and the increase of professionalism of administrators, and the introduction of a real service-orientated sector to pick up the residents at the place where they are. I think when we compare this, what in 2007 started with some initiatives with other countries, then we see that after the accession of the Eastern European neighbors like Poland or the Baltic states, Slovakia and so on, to the EU, the EU financed the energetic refurbishment of multifamily buildings, quite successful. Still, the refurbishment rates are very small, less than 10% in most of the countries. And I think in Ukraine, they are almost zero. Yeah, we have here the director of the fund, of the Energy Efficiency Fund. And I think we should not forget when we are talking about the introduction of new housing solutions. And in parallel to this lack of efficient maintenance and administration of this multifamily stock, there's a lack of professional housing providers in Ukraine. We have no comparable to other countries housing providers offering other solutions than private ownership. And that means the challenge is already since 2014, after the annexation of the Crimea and the IDPs, how to accommodate them and what kind of housing solutions we could offer them. Now I see that there's a possibility also with this new law to introduce new solutions. And these new solutions, they are already mentioned 10 years before in the UNECE Ukraine country profile. That means cooperatives, municipal housing, all these things are already on the table. And of course now we have much more need to build up capacities and to support the ministry in the introduction of this kind of legislation. I think in addition to that, we should focus more to enable the municipalities and gromadas to be active in the provision of housing and to introduce this new kind of models. I will not now go into the detail, but I think I hope that we have a small discussion also with Grzegorz here. What does this mean to introduce public housing and also rental housing models into the market? From my side, I think, also from the German perspective, and maybe everybody knows that Germany is a rental-dominated country. There are a lot of solutions available, and I see the challenge for the donor community to communicate this among each other and not to overburden the Ukrainian side with a lot of solutions, but with appropriate solutions fitting to the possibilities of the donor community and also the financial institutions supporting the UK.
And probably, if I may add, what could be implemented, what is appropriate and has the possibility to be contextualized and put to real life in Ukraine. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that. What of these solutions are there and appropriate for Ukraine. I'll turn to Serhii as the next speaker with the question. I mean, obviously, we spoke about outline the main contours of the housing policy, which are reflected in the law on fundamental principles on state housing policy. How will this contribute to effective housing management and systems, which we spoke may not exist or are suboptimal in Ukraine and have been, and also of financing affordable housing provision? How do you see the future in this regard? You need to press up.
Does it work? Thank you, Besim, for your question and for a comprehensive introduction. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. And first of all, I would like to thank Habitat for Humanity for inviting me to this significant and engaging event. I wish to emphasize the importance of discussion, housing affordability and adequacy today. This housing is a fundamental human necessity worldwide. This issue is especially relevant to Ukraine right now. First and foremost, I would like to tell you several words about UN for Ukrainian Cities project, implemented by the UNECE and funded by BMZ and in collaboration with GZ. A key component of this project supports to the Ministry of Restoration's efforts to develop a new framework for Ukraine's housing policy. When the ministry sought our support, we promptly engaged in the process. Our consultants and experts not only directly participated in the ministry's working group, but also organized capacity building events through this process. Our consultants were involved in the working group that developed the draft law on the fundamental principles of housing policy. And I would like to highlight the main challenges addressed during the working group sessions, which we aim to incorporate into the mentioned draft law. The first one, the existing housing legislation in Ukraine is outlined and conflicting, leading to inefficient housing policy principles. We proposed new principles and policy objective drawing from international documents. We aim to create a foundational draft law to reset the state's policy in this area and change the philosophy regarding who is eligible for state support housing solutions. The next significant challenge for Ukraine's new housing policy is the lack of a market for affordable rental housing, including social housing. Currently, 98% of housing in Ukraine is privately owned, much of which was state-owned before privatization. The absence of an affordable rental housing market highlights the urgent need for Ukraine to restructure housing funds and establish a legal framework for developing affordable rent. Another issue is the lack of transparency in the current housing policy. There is no unified platform for citizens to access information on housing issues in Ukraine. We proposed creating a unified information and analytical housing system to ensure transparent accounting of those eligible for state housing support and to inventory housing that could be used as service or social housing. The fourth challenge is the lack of strategic planning. The draft law suggests establishing program documents for housing policy, primarily a state strategy for housing policy in Ukraine. This document aims to define the foundation main tasks and objectives crucial for Ukraine over the next 5 or 7 years, identifying key elements of housing policy for state focus. And finally, I would like to point out that our project aims to support Ukraine craft a housing policy that not only address immediate needs, but also aligns with the long-term principles outlined in the UN Geneva Charter on Sustainable Housing, the Sustainable Development Goals, the New Urban Agenda, the European Union Housing Partnership Action Plan, and the guidelines for the implementation of the right to adequate housing. Thank you for your attention.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Serhii, for this elaborate outline of the inventory of many problems, the multitude of issues the housing sector, social housing sector faces in Ukraine. And as was mentioned also by Knut, about 97% of the stock is private and most of it is owner occupied. So there's very little stock that Ukraine deals with. It came from a mentality that market will solve it, right? This is the mentality of the 90s. Let the market solve the housing issues. It was not a mentality just in Ukraine, but pretty much in every Central and Eastern European country which was communist before the 90s, right? So obviously it hasn't, right? It's 2024. We can proclaim that strategy and school of thought philosophy hasn't worked out, and we can see that here in Warsaw, where we are today. My next question to Anna is, she's represents a third a sector, an NGO platform that wants to, both help but also show the path, create models of housing provision. She's currently involved in temporary and midterm housing with internally displaced. So my question to Anna is, how do you see actually the role of third sector and of non-profit? We saw some examples from Austria. You've also lived in Austria for a while, and how do you see the applicability of that in the Ukrainian context?
Thank you. I think, so first of all, thank you for having me as a representative of a civil society of Ukraine, as I think this is really crucial for Ukrainian recovery, as it's impact-driven, mission-driven, and really oriented on very distributed and diverse needs, local needs of citizens of Ukraine. I will have some background pictures of our project, as the project is very physical and visible. If I can get a clicker somewhere, I will be thankful. So the thing is that, before full-scale invasion, we used to be a pretty small R&D office on urban strategies, research, and architecture in Ivano-Frankivsk in Ukraine. So basically before that, I was living in Vienna, and I've seen how civil society and basically more like how multi-level stakeholder partnership could work. And it was pretty clear that in Ukraine, in this balance of administration, business, and civil society is really, like before 2014, was really had no capacity and no frame somehow. And It was very clear for me in 2014, like as a revolution happened, I was living in Austria, and I knew I want to come back home and to take this part on civil society. And I'm also happy to represent here the city of Ivano-Frankivsk and civil society of Ivano-Frankivsk, as I find this is like the most vibrant civil society in Ukraine, and maybe even further in the region, as I find the triangle is really balanced throughout these 10 years. It was building up, and now it has very cohesive approach on any challenge we have in Ukraine or Ivano-Frankivsk, and is very known in Ukraine for its social innovation based on civil society. So with the full-scale invasion, it was, I tell that before that, like 6 years as METALAB, we were kind of training, like doing the research and training ourselves, like to tackle this kind of challenge we have now in Ukraine. So it was a bureau of 7 people, and now we are sometimes 30, sometimes 100 people when we go into the construction phase. And it was also, first day, it was clear that housing capacities are exhausted. It's like, and we didn't want to participate in a very temporary solutions. We knew someone will take over it, and we knew we need to think further, and we need to think in an integrated and sustainable way. We don't want to support like containers and ghettos. So we were thinking a lot about a lot of models, but we went into refurbishing abandoned structures in Ukraine, and we found out we have like a lot of them, and they are integrated. They are wired. I don't know. You have like the social infrastructure, engineering infrastructure, everything. So it's cost effective. It's a partnership with the municipality. It's community driven. So we knew it is our fast and effective way to deliver housing. And but it is in this state. So it was awful. It is still awful, and it's not the worst scenario. So we knew we can dignify these housing options. So first it was a volunteering project, and we went to like in 6 weeks we were able to renovate a building of 2,000 square meters for like 175 people, like fully. Like, and this was this collective and multi-stakeholder action, which led us to, like, as of now, we have renovated 7 buildings for 1,500 people in Ukraine. That just sometimes I think it's a very small amount, but like I know that in Ukraine, the existing capacity for housing, social housing, was 1,500 people in the whole Ukraine throughout 30 years. So it's a lot, like what one civil society organization could reach. And so we also were moving in the ownership from kind of a construction team to basically a housing provider. So now we have one building which we fully manage also. And we, in this, like throughout this experience, within 2 years, we really now, like our core project with Habitat for Humanity in the city of Kalush is about setting up the pilot for affordable non-for-profit housing company, basically, which is not very easy in the current legislation, but this is something we are promoting further on. Why? So we work very closely with municipalities, and we are not afraid to work with them, but we know they are more framed and less flexible. So that's why we tackle that pilot from the perspective of civil society in Ukraine now. I think the civil society can provide a more sustainable, community-driven, circular, local economy-based, with great community spaces. We don't have swimming pools yet, as in Austria, but we really try to. I think this is a very cool idea, and we find that social housing should be very nice, and these community spaces should have some physical quality which will empower community to be united. and it should be participatory, designed, community-driven, and gender balanced, inclusive, and very resilient, and also like multi-stakeholder, and also like the international solidarity is also a part of it. And I think there is no one else as civil society which is super mission-driven who could actually deliver all the values in a very low cost and a very fast time.
Cool. Thank you, Anna. That's quite impressive. So congratulations and thank you for going through that. Obviously, you're creating some menu of options and also showing that certain things which people or institutions may think are not feasible because they're in Austria or somewhere else would actually be implemented in your country, and that's a great effort, really. I'll turn to Grzegorz, and Grzegorz, as I said, works for EIB. He's in Luxembourg. He's actually from Warsaw originally, and he's lived in Ukraine for 10 years. So he combines the sort of both perspectives or different perspectives, and he professionally deals with urban issues and housing issues. So coming from his position, I would like, the question for him is, what do you see should be the affordable housing agenda of Ukraine, and where do you see it going towards?
Thank you, Besim. And yes, this is actually a very good question, and I'd like to make a little bit of an introduction to the topic. Is that so we are a bank. European Investment Bank is a bank. So when you look at housing, we of course would like to see it as socially sustainable, providing for social integration. We would like to see it environmentally sustainable, contributing to our climate agenda. But we would like to see it also financially sustainable. And the reason for that is that housing is very expensive. It's a very, very expensive business. It costs a lot of money. Even the richest countries cannot afford themselves to spend public taxpayers' money to build housing for everybody. So Europe is actually quite a successful place when it comes to housing, because Europe has found out a way how to build and maintain good quality housing, which is affordable, but it also pays for itself. And this is a key for successful housing, for successful affordability, for successful social, environmental sustainability. So when we work with Ukraine stakeholders, we basically look at the long term. So of course we have now a very pressing problem with IDPs. We have very pressing problems with the need to provide people with decent living conditions. But we also look to the future. We would like to make sure that whatever is being built today will actually be serving the society, will be well maintained, but also it will not become a drain on public sector budgets. And it's very easy in wrongly managed housing policies to actually have that situation, and then with such a drain on public sector budgets comes under maintenance, comes lowering of quality, comes all the social problems that we can see in many, many countries. So we would like to ensure that this is avoided in Ukraine. And in Ukraine, of course, we have, as Besim told us, the same problems with housing affordability that all other Central European countries face. So if you are a young person moving from a small town to a big city, you basically have to spend all your money on housing, and there is nothing you can save to start a family. And that is why families are being started very late in this region. And Ukraine is not an exception. It wasn't an exception. It's still not an exception. So investment in housing is also investment in the future. So when the war is over, and the war will be over, and Ukraine will prevail, we would like to see places for people to come back. And these places have to be affordable. It has to offer good quality of life. I mean, people would need that. People would demand that. So this has to be offered. these solutions cannot be developed when the war is over. I mean, we have to develop them today. So I'd like to thank very much Ukrainian government and our partners in development of this law. And also I'd like to mention that our European Union partners, with whom we cooperate very closely, we agree that we cannot wait with all those solutions to be developed when we have a good, stable situation. We believe differently. We have to develop solutions and start them being implemented today, even when there is war going on, so that when the war is over, we can actually scale them up and move very rapidly towards full-scale implementation. So here we share the same view with our partners, and we are working on that together. So just to sum up after this quite a long introduction, we believe that housing system in Ukraine should take the best of European best practice. It should offer housing for people of very diverse social and economic base, that it should be not just a social product or social tool. It should be an important part of urban living, targeting quite a big group of society. And here in European Union, we are talking about from 40 to 70% of the people which are potential tenants of public housing system. So we are talking big. We're talking about scale, and this scale will be necessary to also make the system financially viable. So we cannot just look at some little pilot projects and see if they work. I mean, this would also require Ukraine to make a bold decision to actually go full steam ahead with these models and achieve this scale as quickly as possible, because this will give stability and will pave a good way for its success. So it's actually a major task, but Ukraine has got partners, strong partners, people sitting here on the stage, and of course colleagues from the European Union who have recently just approved Ukraine plan, which unblocks 50 billion euro of support for Ukraine. With these partners, I think this is something that we can try doing. We can expect to be successful, and this will create a really good future for all Ukrainian citizens, and also for all of those who will consider coming back to Ukraine from their forced resettlement. Thank you.
Thank you, Grzegorz, and thank you for the encouragement and inspiration. I think it's noteworthy that this is, the biggest human tragedy after World War II. There's never been after World War II in one single situation so many people leaving their homes at the same time, like now in Ukraine, and so many homes destroyed, and such unspeakable level of human tragedy. But it also creates some opportunity to do certain things. And in comparison to other countries, I don't think we can say that any of the Central Europe, Eastern European countries has a perfect affordable housing system. Actually, very, very far from it. So the suffering and the war and the reconstruction effort that comes with it will create certain opportunities to do some stuff that don't exist in Prague or in Warsaw or in other capitals which face some of the same challenges. The next panelist is Ellen. I had a phone call with Ellen last week, which was kind of very informative for me and very useful to prepare for this session. So thank you for that, Ellen. And I did introduce her. She has vast and a multi sort of disciplinary experience in the topics that we're discussing today and in almost all of the countries of the region. She spoke about choice and agency to people while facilitating large-scale social and affordable housing. We spoke about the challenges, and we spoke a little bit about solutions. But how do we do that, Ellen, in Ukraine?
Yes, and this is working, right? Yeah, okay. First, it's so great to be here, and thank you. It's been a very interesting day for me, and I always learn at these events, so it's been really great to be here. And now, of course, we're at the end of this panel. And actually, I think that if we reflect back to the problems and to the status of the law that Ina outlined at the beginning, and this law is really fundamental. But the law is not everything. It's a platform on which strategies, policies, programs, and implementation of those programs will be developed. So it's a starting point, not an ending point. And in that sense, it's very important. At the same time, it's a starting point for a strategy that will cover 5 to 7 years. And let's just take a moment and pause and think about what the challenges are that Ukraine faces right now. So we have a large financial deficit as a result of hugely increased expenditures and much reduced revenues, which is one huge challenge for government. The Russian invasion has devastated the lives of many people, and poverty rates have quadrupled. They've gone up by 400%. We have 3.7 million displaced people within Ukraine and additional refugees outside. And then as the damage and needs assessment, the most recent one just showed, there has been 2 million damaged and destroyed units. And when you think about all of this, it's clear that first of all, you need to be, and I fully agree with everybody on this panel, about the importance of thinking long-term, positioning for the long term. But I think you also need to be practical in the short to medium term and recognize the true challenges and constraints and the living conditions, for example, of displaced people and other similarly affected populations. And so for me, when you start looking at that, and I'm sure most people in the room are familiar with the government's program for compensations to individuals for minor and medium repairs. And that's terrific. But 87% of the damaged housing stock of the units are actually in apartment buildings. And apartment buildings are the great challenge for all of us in this room, because that's where the majority of damages are. It's where the majority of the displaced people came from. And they are complicated. And they are complicated for the reasons that we just heard about, including this unfinished privatization agenda. So also, when you look at the displaced people, another complication is the Russians are still invading. This war is not over. And that means for displaced people, it's very difficult to know what to do. So when you ask them, as IOM did, you find that almost 60% have no immediate plans to return, although they might like to in the longer term, but they have no immediate plans to return within even the next year. Only 6% of people actually had immediate plans to return within the next month. So that's another problem, because those people are the unhoused, many of them, or the underhoused. And the kind of program that it takes to reach somebody who is unhoused or underhoused and is an internally displaced person will be different than the kind of program that it takes to help somebody return home or to help somebody stay where they are. So if you start thinking about what to do and how to do it, and recognizing that apartment buildings are where almost 90% of damages are concentrated, overwhelmingly in urban areas, and the majority of these apartment buildings, only 25% of all of the units actually were considered heavily damaged or destroyed. So 75% of the units are actually considered to be light or medium damages. From where I sit in the short term, that is the agenda, is a big part of the agenda. This and supporting the displaced people where they are two very important key areas, while at the same time figuring out what the programs would look like going forward that will also bring Ukraine closer to its eventual European future. So as we think about this, then we get back to these multifamily buildings, and this is the question of the unfinished privatization agenda, because in fact, only 20 to 30% of these buildings have homeowner associations. When the privatization, as is common in the region, when the privatization was done, in essence, it was a micro-privatization of the units. And people privatized the benefits of those units, but they didn't privatize the obligations of the building in which they were located. So if you are to, as part of your housing policy, to move towards increased sustainability, you will need to ultimately make those owners of those units responsible also for the building in which their units are located in, which is a very big challenge because of the mindset. But just if we can go back again to the numbers, and just to suggest that potentially one of the areas that may be useful to think about is whether you could connect the money for repairs, whether there is a need to accompany that money for repairs for apartment buildings with some energy efficiency improvements. I think the Energy Efficiency Fund actually has some very good experience to share here with us on that. And whether as part of that, what would be a new program, but clearly an essential program, you could use that to resolve the unfinished privatization, which is actually the clear establishment of who is responsible for the multifamily stock. So basically, to think short term and longer term, to not forget the new construction, but to remember also, I went back, I was curious. I looked up how many new units were delivered in Ukraine in the 4 years prior to 2022. And each year, if you average it, it's 120,000 units was the combined construction capacity of the country. That's the rate at which it was delivering prior to the war. So you can also see, now I would assume construction capacity is less because for many obvious reasons, right? So there's a real question even about the construction companies, the capacity of construction companies as you get the buildings, the multifamily buildings will require, in many cases, licensed construction companies, it's not just home repair. It's not like the individuals. So it's much more complex. You need licensed design, licensed repair. And those are the same construction companies that were delivering the 120,000 units per year. Plus, you have probably a fair amount of accumulating demand for new housing, probably particularly in some regions like around Lviv and Poltava and places like that. So it's quite a challenge. There is no one answer. I think basically you will have to work short and long term and on different programs, but keeping in mind always what you can do in the short term, because there are so many people who are suffering right now, and because the financial resources are pretty limited. Maybe just to close on that, the new EU facility, which is we're very happy to see, 50 billion euros, right? The damages alone in the housing stock are 50 billion euros, and that doesn't include the overall combined damages are significantly more. And this this facility is not intended to go just for housing. So there really will be a huge need to prioritize. And maybe my last thought on that is recently the ministry adopted a new prioritization framework and indicators that help prioritize which kinds of investments are higher priority and lower priority. And that might be something that it would be useful for all of us to learn more about.
Thank you very much, Ellen, for this extensive, really, overview of the multitude of challenges. 1.4 million damaged units, 1/3 of them destroyed, 2/3 destroyed but livable. Only 20% of multi-apartment buildings having homeowner association or some form of management. 50 million in damages. In addition to that, affordable housing needs that pre-exist, continue to exist. It's a lot of layers of issues, and I would like to conclude here the first round of questions. I would like to thank all the panelists for their. I learned a lot from this conversation. That's probably because you are more experts than I am on the subject. But please give a round of applause to our panelists for their contributions. Okay, so we have about 30-ish minutes left, and I would like to open up the for audience questions, really, to anyone on the panel. Please get Julie. You will get this microphone from me. We have another microphone here. If somebody can help me with circulating the microphone, please introduce yourself, ask the question, and tell me or the panel who do you want to answer it. Okay, now you have two.
First of all, thank you very much to Ina Sarapina for her excellent introduction to the discussion. My name is Julie Lawson. I'm a researcher and from RMIT. My question concerns the comments that each of you made about the solutions that you see as being useful. How do you see the general principles law in assisting you or perhaps frustrating you? We know that general principles law still has a period of consultation in April. So are there issues in that law which you think still need some tweaking to enable the best possibilities to and progress?
Okay. Do you want to?
Thank you, Julia. Maybe you know right now the Parliament committee are providing with 3 rounds of discussion, general principles. But I would like to tell not only this first, but such significant draft law on fundamental principles of housing policy. It will be only first step in huge housing policy reform in Ukraine. The second draft law about housing management stock. The next one, the social rental housing, and more than 60 law and bylaws will be changed. So if we talk about general principles, we have to think about all areas, not only building social housing, but in management and affordability in social rent and other programs. And after strategy, government and local authorities have to develop a program of affordable housing. I know that ministry involve all institutions, all organizations, and all scientists for this process, and I think you can join to this process too. Thoughts?
Yeah, I also would like to comment this a bit. I think after such a long time that nothing happened in the legislation, now the process started, and I hope that law on principles will be adopted soon. so that it can be connected with real practical experiences and with practical projects. Even if the war is not over, we are starting now to think about that. And when we see the mentioned scale, Grzegorz mentioned that, and the huge numbers, we should imagine that of each of these numbers, 10%, and in the beginning the upfront costs are even higher. 10-15% are cost for human resources to prepare something and to accompany the implementation of something. That means refurbishment, new housing, and so on. And we need capacities also to evaluate and analyze such bottom-up initiatives like from METALAB and others to use also the energy of the society in finding new housing solutions. And we have, my personal vision is that we have a lot of good housing providers in Europe, and the assessment process of Ukraine to EU and the facility should be used to discuss these solutions more deeply. For instance, in Germany, we have 750 municipal housing companies, 2,000 cooperatives all over Germany. And in each of the cities, we have a lot of Ukrainian refugees. We should integrate them, to connect them with projects at home, to bring this in a wider scale, also with regard to human resources, and then go into further laws, for instance, to improve the cooperative law. What was mentioned in the presentation of INNA, the operators for affordable housing, to name them exactly, and for instance, to name them as municipal housing companies and to install them, and then to improve in parallel the legislation and not to wait too long with this very academic process. And I hope that also the financial institutions and the commissions are focused on results and also on failure, that we make some practical experience together and construct housing and refurbish buildings. And I think in all cases, municipalities can play a more important role as intermediaries to their citizens and help them to implement programs and also the refurbishment, for instance, of multifamily buildings.
I think Anna wants to comment.
I wanted to emphasize on diverse stakeholders who could do affordable housing, and especially non-for-profit organizations, civil society organizations, and the so basically under almost any law you can still develop like affordable housing companies, so which we are doing now with Habitat for Humanity in Ukraine. So it's pretty complex. You have diverse legal entities, you have still a lot of challenges with taxes you still need to pay because you are kind of semi-civil society, semi-commercial company, and you do not know exactly where you belong and when tax office will come and ask you questions. So this is one of the issues. So, I mean, it is possible when you have a wish and like a vision, but I think this law should have more power to the local stakeholders and housing providers, and in terms of social mix, or in terms of like diverse decisions they could make locally, and it will be more effective and more like mission driven, and provide some preferable conditions for these affordable housing companies whenever it's a municipal company or a non-for-profit or civil society company. So that there is competition also.
Create a legal base to make it a straightforward activity, not trying to sort of manage and go left and right to find for the right solution, and also create policy focus and by providing actual support for establishment of such forms. And I think this is crucial also to connect to the morning session when we speak about Austria. There is tradition, there is legal basis, and there is policy focus. right? So tradition creates demand, so it makes something easily doable because it's been done before, so it's not nothing revolutionary. But there are, municipalities and non-profit housing providers have the tools to do so. So creating those tools is, I think, important for the legal and policy framework here. So currently, you're saying that it's like you have some tools, but you have to search for them. It's not a straightforward process.
You need to have good lawyers.
So the feedback is make it easier for people like for METALAB and like-minded programs and municipality-led programs to
like for more
function.
Stakeholders and like I think Austrian or German model where you have a fair competition between municipal companies, businesses, and civil society, and then it's work.
Grzegorz, question everybody wants to comment. So please go ahead.
Yes. If you agree, I'd like to actually respond to Julie's question, but also comment on two other topics very briefly. So to respond to Julie's question, the question really is, when we create governmental policies, they basically say what the state should be doing, but equally important is also to say what the state shouldn't be doing. And in our work at the European Investment Bank, we very often, everywhere, globally, on every single continent, there is a very simple pattern. There is a problem, housing is a problem, or whatever else is a problem. A new, young, typically minister comes and he has a solution. Tax breaks, smart financing products, and magically the problem will be resolved. And then typically they last for 5 years, these people, and then after 5 years they resign and nothing really is resolved, but 5 years is lost. So let's not make those mistakes in Ukraine, actually. And for housing policy, what seems to be a consensus among European housing experts is that housing policy should empower supply side activities and should maybe reduce the demand side activities. So country in which we are currently sitting is a perfect example of these mistakes. And now even the entire press is fully in agreement that these policies are just wrong. They subsidized demand. Previous government did it with 2% mortgage loan. The new government is doing 0% mortgage loan. What we can see in Warsaw, prices of real estate growing up to the level of Luxembourg. I live in Luxembourg and properties are exactly at the same price point as in Luxembourg. Now, salaries in Luxembourg are 4 times higher than in Warsaw, okay? So it tells you something what wrong state policy can lead to. So this is basically maybe one thing that I just wanted to comment on. I wanted also to say something about unfinished privatization. As Besim was saying, I was involved in housing reforms in Ukraine a couple of years ago, where this unfinished privatization was something that I could be blamed for, I would like to admit. So the privatization itself wasn't really unfinished. Everything was privatized. And it was properly recorded in the Civil Code of Ukraine, which, beyond any doubt, is telling who actually owns a multifamily residential building. Now, there are problems that some people don't read the law, or they choose not to read it, and they manage buildings illegally, okay? And that is a problem not with laws or reforms, it's a problem with enforcement, okay? The other thing is that what really was unfinished, and I have to say that this is something that was conscious, really. We knew that the problem may happen, but we didn't have enough resources to resolve it, was actually to add additional part of the Civil Code of Ukraine. Here in Poland, but also everywhere in Western Europe, if there is a residential building that has apartments that belong to other people, various owners, automatically it gives rise to a homeowners association, condominium, syndic, many different names for the same situation, because there is a possibility to have such organizational form. Now in Ukraine, you don't have that possibility. That form does not exist. To create that form, somebody would have to write a substantial part of the civil code of Ukraine, but nobody has done it. And that is why. This is really the reason why we have 20% of homeowners association, because they require action from the people. Here in Poland, for example, no action is required. The homeowners association is being created automatically when at least one apartment becomes property of somebody else than the rest of the building. And in Ukraine, something has to be done. And very quickly, just one thing on scale. I mean, by working with European clients, we have this excellent opportunity to see solutions that work. And for example, I mean, we have Sweden. Today, Sweden is fantastic, very rich, and a country that is always given as an example of great things to do. But actually, in Poland, back in the 30s, we had Swedish nannies. I mean, Sweden was a poor country, and Poland was richer than that. Sweden was going through a very rapid industrialization process in the 60s, which made it very rich. Now, the government of Sweden had to support this industrialization with housing construction. Now, country of 8 million people at that time, put up a goal of building 1 million housing units, and they did it in 8 years. So, I mean, when there is a will, there is a way, right? We can learn from these examples. We can put those policies in place, and this is possible, right? Everything is possible. And I have to say, just one last comment. I mean, Ukraine is a country that I have not seen any other countries changing so quickly. So if somebody else has done it, Ukraine can do it twice as fast and 5 times better. We know that. So we should believe in our capability to form the future in which we want to live. That's my summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Grzegorz. I think we have 2 or 3 questions from the audience. We have 5, and we have 20-ish minutes. So please introduce yourself, the question, and if you know who you're asking the question towards.
I start.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Denis Avaux. I work for Habitat for Humanity in Brussels with EU institutions and Brussels-based. My question is, I think, is for the 2 representatives of the public banks. One day we will have conferences on the reconstruction of Ukraine when private investors and public banks will find that the conditions are met. Now, these conferences are usually prepared by formal working groups. Are these groups already working now? Do you have within your institutions formal meetings on the future reconstruction of Ukraine?
The answer is yes. I mean, I probably could explain in very long detail what we do and how we do it, but I guess we are very strongly preparing for this. This is one of the biggest priorities that our institution is facing. We know it's going to be a huge challenge, but we are really getting resources in place to be able to respond to the challenge. I mean, the challenge is so huge that we can never really be fully prepared, and we know we will have problems during this period, and we will be facing big issues, huge issues. I mean, now the biggest issue is complete uncertainty. So, yeah, we are trying to do whatever we can in the situation, and I think we are really doing something. But we know that this reconstruction will not be a quick process. I know that after Second World War, reconstruction basically took decades. And, we may not want to talk about it, but that's a reality. We cannot do it so quickly, even if we try as hard as we do right now. We will, of course, step up our efforts, but we know it's a huge thing to do. Thank you.
Reconstruction of Ukraine is ongoing, and it will not be financed by a donor conference. It's not in that sense. So there are multiple donors who are contributing. Thus far, I believe I looked at the website before I came here, and I saw that the World Bank had put in $42 billion into the Ukrainian economy since 2022, which is a significant amount of money. Why into the Ukrainian economy? Into the government budget. And the first way of prioritizing what needs to be done is by government through the government budget. And we, the World Bank, believe it is extremely important that the government continue to lead and to govern. if there is no government, there is no reconstruction. And so, because of the enormity of the needs, there has actually been a coalition, as I understand, among the major economies that are supporting Ukraine with this budget deficit, and also in agreement with the IMF, that has allowed the government to shape priorities, to shape its own budget, and for the major financiers to come in as part of filling unmet needs, or, if you will, part of the budget deficit. So for us, a lot of that means that we have spent a lot of money paying teachers and healthcare workers. We've also put a significant amount of money into the government's minor and medium repairs program, the individual compensations. I think we've done over 50,000 units so far, and it's going up fairly quickly. So just to say, I know the donor conference, I always associate a bit more with Middle Eastern kinds of situations, and I think it's a very different approach here. In part, I think because of the leadership of the EU, but also of the IMF and the World Bank, and in general the entire international community has been united around Ukraine and the Ukrainian government, and supporting the government in the moment, not just at some point in the future.
Thank you, Ellen. Just a quick follow-up. So of the 42 billion that went into Ukraine, most of it, or if not all, went via the government. That's your main vehicle as World Bank.
Most of it went through, not all of it, but most of it.
Thank you. Please go ahead. I don't think we can hear you in the mic.
I'm Olga Solovey, and I represent Charity Foundation Housing for IDP, and we do reconstructions for IDP, and we work with municipalities. And my worries is a person with a real estate background, so I know how real estate for 15 years, how it works in private sector in Ukraine. So my biggest worry now with this new law of housing policy, because I witnessed several of laws in Ukraine that were accepted, they were supported by donors, and they were wasted. We wasted a lot of time, and nothing happened because because in this new housing policy, a certain role is devoted to municipalities. In Ukraine, we have 1,400 municipalities, and we have no people capacity to do all this work. I know from my experience of cooperating with municipalities, there is no professionals, no experts who can do all this work. They do not know how to work with housing, how to work with redevelopment, how to work with bidding, with all the process of real estate development. And my biggest maybe proposal and offer to all of those people who devoted a lot of their time and effort to develop this housing policy, I looked through this draft of the law, and I say that it's really great work and very good intentions. But without further supporting the municipalities in technical assistance, how to implement this, it will be waste of time. Thank you.
Question. So municipalities, 1,400 of them are ill-equipped or not equipped to implement housing policy and legislation. There was talk about this in the first session today as well. How do we overcome that? I see 3 hands, so please, more. Just briefly, so we can get another question.
Well, very briefly, I think I fully agree with what you said, and the fears and the worries and the constatation that there is a problem with capacity. The other thing is, though, well, certain cities already have certain capacities that can be helped in development. There are also some cities which are, together with bilateral private donors and other institutions, already building housing, and they are learning already right now. So apart from our financial assistance, we will also provide technical assistance to help train and teach and develop skills of all those people at both local and central level. I mean, we haven't really talked about the system, how it should be, but there should be local delivery, but there should also be a very strong central national policy setting, policy framework and policy bodies that would actually manage housing programs for the country. So yes, this is absolutely true, but this is somehow being taken care of.
Okay, let me add that question for the other. Does it have to be municipal? Would it be a social? Just to add a little bit of spice to this, does it have to be municipal services strengthened? Is that the way it's done elsewhere? Are there any other forms and sources to do that? Quickly.
It's on. I think that's a critical question. I would not say that there are no capacities. Yeah, there are some capacities, there are jacks, and there are some operational stuffs. This can be used and can be enriched. But I think it must be clear that working in housing is a profession, and this profession is worth to earn money for life and to survive with this money. That means the absolutely underdeveloped service idea in maintaining and administration of multifamily building needs to be changed. And when we think about new constructions, these capacities should be established. And I think from our side, what I see, we have around 200 twin cities, German-Ukrainian twin cities. In each of the German cities, we have municipal housing. We should connect this to the city partnerships and establish a horizontal management structure for that. And cheaper than this, we cannot get capacity building and housing.
Maybe just to add, and I agree with what my colleague said, the process of decentralization in Ukraine, which is linked to EU accession, right? And I have worked all over the globe. I have never seen a country decentralize as quickly and as deeply as this country did from 2015 through basically the second invasion, the 2022 invasion. So that's one comment. I think you need both levels. I think the objective would be not to replace the roles of municipalities, but to support them in developing the capacities that they need to do their jobs in housing or in delivery of other kinds of services. Because if there is a European future, they are at the center of the European future, so we can't lose that, right? And so that's kind of the challenge, is how central government and can support municipalities, and all of us, how we can all support municipalities to develop the capacities that you need. And in some places, I think it's very, very difficult while war is going on. So it depends, I think, a lot on where you are.
Yeah, I believe, I don't know, like our approach, I think we were like around Ukraine with Annika, Julia, Rick from Habitat, and like close to 100% of mayors told, oh, that would be so great if civil society builds housing. Like, we don't want to build, we don't know how to do it. So in the sense, they really respect and give this power to civil society. But also there are municipalities like Vinnytsia or Lviv or Mariupol, which have a very strong municipality, and this is their strong side. And we were, even now, while developing projects, we know where, so it requires time, right, to be trained and to gain some capacity. So we see like this first phase as building on strong sides. Like if Vinnytsia has a strong governance and not very strong civil society, it's better to go through municipal housing. And if Ivano-Frankivsk has a strong civil society, we pilot it there. And there is no right answer. We need to build everything, both, or like all the options. So And I think, it was really good in this Austrian model that they emphasize on piloting phase and also going back to the strategy. So I think this tactical and strategical and term levels are super important. And we need, I think, even within the law, like to leave this flexibility for further change, because I think the world dynamic changes a bit faster than laws. So it's a bit of a challenge, but I think we need to keep it in our minds and still stay flexible and build on the strong sides.
Yeah. I just wanted to... This is actually a very good question, which I very much like, because so Besim asked, does it have to be delivered by public sector? Can't we maybe do a PPP and deliver it by somebody who can do it in a professional way? So we are bankers and we work with PPPs as well, and I'd like to disprove one myth. I mean, it doesn't work. If you have no capacity to deliver yourself and you contract it out to somebody who can do it, he will basically rob you. You have to have much stronger capacity than normally for public sector delivery you would have in order to effectively manage a PPP transaction. And we have countries which do it, for example, Ireland, which is actually a very good user of PPP models, but they have very strong central government unit that deals with PPPs, and this capacity allows them to get all those benefits of new technologies, of faster delivery, of better cost control, of more efficient management of the process. But it doesn't come as a solution to your lack of capacity, actually. I mean, you really have to be capable of doing things very well to manage this, to your benefit. So, no, unfortunately.
No, Eleanor wants to comment on that.
Terrible commenting on the comments. And also, I mean, we've talked about the municipal direct role in housing is one way to look at it, or maybe there's, other ways of subsidizing at the local level. But in most places, we will find that the majority of new construction will come from the private sector and it will be unsubsidized. And their municipality actually has a big role to play in terms of all of the permissions that are required, making the steps clear and transparent, time-bound. These are things that create obstacles for developers that are very difficult for them to overcome. And those obstacles gets translated into costs. So that's one, and that's one area. And I know there's a whole discussion about that, how you get a land site and then what you can use that, build on that land site. And do you have to go negotiate with the municipality about the use of that land site, which can be opportunity to, it can be opportunity, the need to negotiate. And so there is actually a big role for municipality in terms of making sure that their parts of the private sector market work well and putting accountability into them, into the market for that, like with standards.
Thank you, Ellen. I saw a couple more hands, so please go ahead. One, two, you're here, and then Yulia. Yeah, okay, Yulia, go ahead.
Yeah, hello. My name is Yulia Bushko. I'm from EFC. We are long supporter of the Ukraine Energy Efficiency Fund, and we've done a lot of the legislation work. So this is a comment on the data, basically, because we had a wonderful panel about the new housing policy, and my comment is about the current data. Was there a possible to have like an inventory of the situation with who owns what? Because we are looking at, we of course focused on the homeowners association and creation of the homeowners association. And what we can say that even during the war, there were 1,000, even sometimes more, at least 1,000 new homeowners association created. So far we have 39. I opened the latest data, 39,709. So about 40,000 homeowners associations that are currently in Ukraine. So taking into consideration, do we have the exact number of the multi-housing sector, because we have the numbers of, the state numbers for the homeowner associations, but taking into consideration the multifamily sector that has been damaged or occupied currently, maybe it's time to have some inventory, and then based on these numbers, it would help to focus the new housing policies. So this is the comment for the, I guess.
But Yulia is saying things have changed since the last time that there is an inventory, and because life goes on in Ukraine, there's perhaps a need to update data both on building stock and also on homeowner association regime, and also address maybe the dilemma, because sort of privatization or not privatization. I don't want to go there because we will waste time, but the fact that homeowner association are not formed is in 80% or maybe less in the stock is a result of certain gaps in legislation which transferred that. It doesn't mean they are not owned by anybody. It means they are not registered as such.
No, a little bit. My suggestion is to check, because in some areas, for instance, in western parts where there is like the majority will right now, the business and everything is moving, it's about 40% which is owned by homeowners associations. Even more. So it depends.
But even if there is no homeowner association, the apartment building owners own their apartments. So it doesn't mean that it's just to clear that dilemma. It doesn't mean it's state-owned. It's just not appropriately registered in the and therefore it sort of creates a hurdle for management and maintenance of the property. So that needs to for sure be addressed, because it's addressed in most of the other countries in the region. Not all, though. Yeah, can we go to the last question, and if we have time, we'll comment on that.
Thank you. I'm Anka Dragomir. I'm one of the youth delegates, and I represent Romania. My question, actually two on-point questions, are for Anna. The first one is, what was the spark, the reason, what motivated you to co-fund METALAB? And the second one was, of course, because I'm a young person and I'm thinking how to get involved into this, regarding this subject. What do you think? How could we, the young people, the young generation, can get more involved in this subject, but apart from the things that we already know, like awareness and volunteering? Thank you.
Thanks. It's an important question. We just actually were talking during the youth delegates speech that it would be great to have Habitat Youth Ukraine, because I'm looking in the direction, Rick's direction, because I find that youth is really like having this awareness and movement and spark, which gives hope for our future countries. So I must say, like, my first maybe inspiration was actually when it was like after living in Austria, when I've seen like communal good, like how like social just environment could work, and like when I was looking for some best practices, I was constantly driven to some municipal or collectively owned properties or design. I'm an architect, so basically this is very spatial for me, and I was always dreaming to do that in Ukraine, that like actually public space, which is actually, I think, the space for democracy, like, right, this is the space where it happens, should serve this purpose, like the architecture and the space should serve this purpose. So basically we were also talking about the role of architect, which becomes a coordinator of the whole challenge, but also policies and legislation which formulates this environment. And it was my main driver, like to deliver this public good, like, and not to change Ukrainians, but to show them that this is possible and you are possible in this space. And this is the main inspiration to see how this flourished. Yeah.
like so two things. I mean, one question was about statistics, and here we have to also give quite a good applause to the authors of that guiding principles law that is being currently developed, is that they are putting in an extensive information system to exactly do that and many more in the property and housing sector to really understand very well what is the situation with properties and with people and where are the needs that are unmatched. So Ukraine is an example of an excellent IT system of services serving population. So using this example, there is a very big push to digitalize also the housing side of it, which I think is great. The second question on property, actually, this is something that we haven't spoken, but look, in Ukraine, you may own your apartment, and by virtue of owning your apartment, you also own the building, but you don't own the piece of land which is underneath that building. And in a normal situation, when there is no war, you don't really care, because nobody can take your building from you, right? It stays there. But there was a case in Kiev, a rocket basically came and destroyed fully one building, and there is no more building. So these people, they stopped owning anything. I mean, one day they had the beautiful apartment in the center of Kiev, and tomorrow, basically they have nothing. And this is a problem. And should they own this piece of land? Should they have a long-term lease for that land? I mean, these are valid questions, but at this moment, due to inconsistencies in land management and housing policies, these people have been left with nothing, at the mercy of municipal government, really. So it's a real issue.
Thank you. And we've just sparked another thread of conversation, which is, a couple more comments. We have a few more minutes, so don't worry about the time. Helen?
So just to say, you asked also about sort of an exact number or an inventory of all the damaged buildings. And indeed, there is, there's like one digital ecosystem that Grzegorz referred to that the government is working on. And within that, there's different elements. And one of the elements is, in fact, a damage inventory, an inventory of damaged properties that needs to link to the official registry, right? And that's actually one of the challenges, because the e-registry, which was established, I believe, in 2015, only has less than half of the properties are in the e-registry. Many of the properties were only registered on paper. So they're eligible to be registered in the e-registry, but they're not there yet. But there is this whole idea of moving to that. And because of the way DIA, which is the DIA app, I think everybody knows what that is. The way DIA works is it actually is interacting with this damage inventory also, which is interacting with the registry.
Thank you, Ellen. Knut, briefly, we are starting to be told that we should wrap this up. They need the space.
Yeah, but
we would continue for an hour otherwise.
Now I start to like this discussion about this unfinished privatization, especially, and I would like to comment Julia's question. I have no statistic, but I think to come to an end of this unfinished privatization, there need to be the foundation of OSPBs. There need to be the transfer of the land plots to them. There need to be the refurbishment of the buildings.
On building level.
On building level, on individual building level. And there need to be then a professional administration and maintenance of these buildings to secure the future. And this all together makes for me finishing the privatization.
And it's also a question of, sort of enforcing it, because it asks for people to organize, but it doesn't assume automatically that they're organized if they haven't had a meeting. So I think that we've seen in other countries, to create a system where, regardless whether they have a meeting or not, they are homeowner association of the building. I think we would have to wrap it up, Anna. So please, just 30 seconds, and we'll continue maybe after break.
Just a small comment that I believe that in this housing ecosystem there is like a lack of conversation around like a very professional community management, because we always talk about building maintenance, and what happens actually inside of OSBB, it's a horror. Like, sorry, but it's a very, very low key, I don't know, management. So, and especially for vulnerable, it's like a key thing.
And believe me, it's not a problem only in Ukraine. I think we have a similar problem.
So
it's not a sector that has developed. Probably in many countries, there's not a lot of money to be made in it, so there is not a lot of competition, and the quality of supplies in certain places is low. Certain places comparable to Ukraine. But I'll stop the panel here because I think we run out of time, and I would like to really sincerely thank once again Ms. Ina Sarapina for her introduction to the session. And to my 5 panelists, it's been really an enjoyment to moderate this panel, and I've actually learned quite a lot. I would summarize it. Yeah, not a lot of things are easy, but nothing is impossible. So I think this panel signifies it, because it's led by people who have done things that are not easy, but are trying to prove that they are possible. So thank you for that, and thank you for all of you in the audience for really actively engaging during this hour and 45 minutes. So thanks again.
Go ahead. You hang on together.
Yeah.